Welcome back here to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast here on a Friday, December 13th. We're going to jump right back into our game picks that we didn't finish yesterday. Only for time's sake, I think it's better to just kind of split it up. So we have to get to the remaining 6 games that we didn't talk about yesterday. And we left off on the Bengals and Titans game. We don't see the Bills and Lions game on here because we isolated that one on Wednesday. Because it was such a huge game, I wanted to talk about it more in depth. So, that's why it's not mentioned on here, right? We already essentially previewed that game. So, starting off with the left side of things, the Bengals traveled to Tennessee to take on the Titans. An interesting, kind of storyline here because Brian Callahan is the head coach of the Titans. He came over from the Cincinnati Bengals as their former offensive coordinator now. So, a bit of a reunion there, and I think for both of these teams it's kind of interesting because I was pretty high on the Titans, and I just figured the Bengals were going to be good anyway, but it's been pretty disappointing for both of them, obviously, because the Titans have one of the worst records, obviously, at 3-10, and just haven't really found much consistency from anywhere on offense. Will Levis has really been, I'll say up and down, but it's really been more down than there has been ups. And their defense has been pretty well coached, and they've performed pretty well in some aspect. But you're just not really getting anything from that offense. And DeAndre Hopkins was traded away, so it's been a struggle that way, obviously. So from that point, then you look at the Bengals, and it's kind of the opposite, the complete opposite with them, where their defense really hasn't given you much all year, but their offense is really just scoring at will, it seems like, with Joe and Jamar Chase having historical seasons for them, but they still have a losing record. So very lackluster, very underwhelming season for both of them. But in terms of this game, how I see them matching up, the Titans, I think, are just focused on other things, not just really winning games. And the Bengals, are still technically fighting for the playoffs. So I'm going to take the Bengals here. I think with a loss, the Bengals would officially be eliminated, so they're going to have a little bit extra motivation going into this game. So give me the Bengals to win on the road against their former offensive coordinator. Then we move down one spot, and this game, probably like 3 weeks ago, I was probably not even going to talk too much about this game, but then I started thinking this morning when I knew I had to talk about it. And it's funny because both of these teams last met in 2020, actually in the playoffs, when the Browns eliminated the Steelers on the road, and then they traveled to Kansas City and, were in a pretty close game with the Chiefs. They ended up losing 22-17, but in that point in time in history, I think people were starting to look at the Browns as, like, they might be starting to turn a corner here, right? It looks like they have their quarterback in Baker Mayfield. They just went toe-to-toe with the Chiefs, it seems like. This could be the beginning of, their story arc, basically, right? This could be where they take this starting point and then just build on it for years to come, right? But obviously, it's been everything but that, right? Because Baker moved on. This team's defense has still pretty much stayed together, but the quarterback and the offense really haven't been there at all for this team. So while the Chiefs, obviously we know what they've gone through, right, and how successful they've been. So now this time around, the Chiefs are going to be taking on Jameis Winston in this game and going up against Patrick Mahomes. And I think it's interesting, too, because not only has Cleveland lost their last 2 games, but they've shown, like, all their deficiencies, right, with the turnovers and, the inconsistencies on offense as well, right? It's not always, a steady thing to ride, basically, right? With Jameis, the gunslinger in him, it's not always the thing that you can expect, the same kind of result, positive and negative, any given day. So, you got to live and die with that, obviously, but there's obviously some downsides, like the turnovers. But I think it would be so funny and just so, like just epitomizing this season if the Chiefs traveled to Cleveland, and for some reason this game was close. I expected it to be close because all the Chiefs games are close. And wouldn't it be just great if the Browns finished with a losing record, but 3 out of their potential 4 wins would be at home against the Steelers, at home against the Ravens, and then at home against the Chiefs? Wouldn't that just be like like the most randomest, trivia fact you're gonna hear in like 5 to 6 years or something like that. And that's why I'm gonna go with Cleveland to win this game. At home, I think they definitely play better. The high scoring game against Denver, that was in Denver. They just lost to the Steelers in Pittsburgh. But at home, there's something I think just playing at home for them with all those fans. They don't care that they have a losing record. They're going to go there, be rowdy, and try their best to get some sort of an advantage over the other team. And it's not like the Browns are awful. Like, they have like decent players, but it's just not really worked out this year. And you want to start with Myles Garrett and going at that left side of the Chiefs' offensive line. The offensive line for the Chiefs hasn't been great really all year, and now you face a monster like Myles Garrett. That's a pretty big, disadvantage, I would say. And they have pretty good corners. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Emerson, and those guys on the back end. They're pretty good in man coverage, so they're able to bring a lot of pressure at Patrick. And I think that could be a solid formula for them. And also, they're going to have to be extremely lucky and get every bounce. But I think I'm going to go with Cleveland just for the storyline, the plot, and for Jameis Winston to continue to be a living legend as he is. So I'm going to go with Cleveland in this one to upset the Chiefs. Then Miami and Houston is an interesting matchup because it's a clinching scenario for the Texans, because if the Texans win and the Colts lose to Denver as well, the Texans would secure the AFC South for the second year in a row. But Miami's not just going to lay down either. They've been pretty tricky this year, and they're playing inside, in Houston, obviously, so the Dolphins don't have to worry about that, and it's looked pretty good. They've won 4 of their last 5 games, whereas Houston has been in a lot of close games, and they've won 2 of their last 5, so they really haven't had the luck, potentially, in these close games, and something always feels like it's either missing or it's just not clicking with the Texans, in my opinion, right? When I've watched them, I feel like they should be a lot better than they are, and I don't know if it's the youth or what, but it feels like they should be a lot more comfortable in some of these games, but they just haven't been. But I think I'm still going to go with the Texans because I am unsure about them, again, because I was super high on them, if you guys remember, at the beginning of the year. But in this game, the Dolphins do worry me a little bit, but I just saw the Jets, have a decent control over the Dolphins in their last game, and the Jets just don't really close games out very well, so I think that was a big part of it. But I think Houston, with the kind of running game that they have, and still they're just as good as the Jets, and it sounds like an oxymoron because the Jets don't have a good record, but you guys know what I mean. Like, they have the same amount of good players, if not a lot better players than the Jets. So if the Jets could get out to a lead on the Dolphins, I think the Texans could too, at home especially. And if they could keep the turnovers down, I think the Houston Texans can win this game. It's going to be close, but I like Joe Mixon to kind of keep the pace of this game for the Texans. Then moving on to the other side, the Colts and the Broncos. A matchup of a couple horses, I guess, right? Colts and Broncos, right? Broncos definitely. I guess Colts are the same thing. But anyway, in reality, the last spot in the wild card, we got the last spot in the wild card round going up against the team that's in 8th place. And the Broncos right now are the 7th seed in the AFC, and the Colts are right on their heels to try and steal that spot away from them, essentially. And that obviously adds a lot more incentive. And you also want to add another thing that we're going to mention with the Chargers. The Chargers and the Chargers and the Broncos have the same record. They're both 8-5. So in a scenario where the Chargers lose, 8-6, right? The Broncos lose, right? 8-6. And then the Colts, if the Colts were to win, give me a second here. If the Colts were to win and they're one spot away from entering, the playoffs essentially in the AFC, if the Colts win, they would be 7-7. And the Broncos would be 8-6, and the Chargers would be 8-6. So the Colts would only be one game away from both of those teams, really amping up the pressure over the course of these last couple weeks. So that's obviously a scenario that could happen. And it would be directly affecting a direct competitor, right, for one of the last spots in the wild card round. So that's obviously a lot of pressure, and for the Colts also to not lose the division right away, also with the Texans, right? They want to keep pace with them as well. But with all that being said, I'm going to go with the Broncos because I'd love to see Indy win, right? But I don't know if I could really trust Anthony Richardson in this game as a passer because I feel like that defense is going to get after him, and he's playing better. I like that he's playing better, and he's really convinced a lot of people, including myself. But, I mean, that Broncos defense is really good. Like, they create turnovers, they pressure the quarterback and things like that. They don't really allow a lot of, big runs and things like that also. So you're going to have to depend on Anthony Richardson's arm, and I don't think I'm prepared to do that yet. So I think it's just too much to ask, and I'm going to go with the Broncos in that game. Then we look at this other game, the Patriots at the Arizona Cardinals. Both teams are on a 3-game losing streak. Kyler's performances have been worrying a little bit over the course of this losing streak because it's just been too many turnovers in bad moments also. And on the side of New England, they've been in pretty close games, 2 out of their last 3. But overall, I think Arizona has been good enough to win these types of games. The games that they've lost, they've been in there, but it's going back to the turnovers with Kyler and throwing them at bad points where either the game gets away from you or it's a big point in the game where the game's tight and you throw an interception or something like that. So, they've been right there, but they've just lost all the big moments currently. But I think that ends in this game. I like Arizona because they just have a more talented team. The Patriots are still, in the infant stage of this process. So the Cardinals are a little bit more advanced. I expect Kyler to kind of keep the turnovers down, play a lot cleaner, and come away with this game. So I'm going to go with the Cardinals. And then lastly here, I got the Chargers and the Buccaneers. A lot of playoff implications here because the Buccaneers are trying to hold on to first place in the NFC South. They just got first place over the Falcons, so they want to keep that lead over them. And the same thing for the Chargers. They have the same record as the Broncos, so if the Broncos were to win, like I predicted, and the Chargers were to lose, then the Broncos would actually jump over them, and they would be the 6th seed, and the Chargers would be the 7th seed, traveling to Buffalo instead of potentially traveling to Houston or Pittsburgh, right? That's a big difference. The Bills haven't lost at home yet, so that's obviously huge. You want to have the best possible seed, and this is a pretty interesting matchup between both of them. The Chargers are coming off of a tough loss to the Chiefs, while the Buccaneers are feeling pretty good because they've been on a little winning streak. They regained first place, like I said, and they're playing pretty well. Despite the loss, though, the way the Chargers are competing, and that I saw them compete against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, was pretty reassuring to me, even without Ladd McConkey, who I expect to be back this week. This is also the last test for the Buccaneers. The last real test, because the rest of their games are against teams with losing records. So this is the last kind of difficult game that the Buccaneers are going to have to play, and I feel like I'm leaning more towards the Chargers because of that. They don't want to drop to the 7th seed, and the addition of Ladd McConkey and the fact that Justin Herbert never throws interceptions and plays a really efficient game, I think is just a bit more of a higher level of execution that can get them over the line than the Buccaneers. I think the Bucs sometimes have their moments where they go a little bit cold on offense, and the Chargers defense is very good. So I'd like them matching up against the the Chargers in this one. So I'm going to go with the Chargers. I think they have enough. Ladd McConkey's going to come back, and I think it's going to make a big difference in this game. So those are all of our picks for Week 15. It should be another entertaining weekend of football. So with that being said, and talking about the league and the NFL, obviously, we're going to come back and talk about a couple stories that are worth mentioning. There was a few of them, so I kind of wanted to include them in this one episode. So we're going to talk about the fact that OBJ got cut today from the Miami Dolphins. KJ Osborne was signed with the Washington Commanders. Hollywood Brown returned to the Kansas City Chiefs, and he should have been practicing with them this week. All of that, we're going to give you guys more insight into when we return right after this.
Looking